Well, welcome back to Hard Candy. Today, I am really thrilled to have George Aldhizer with us. If you remember the last episode, we had Rachel, George's wife, and they are both parents to David that you've got the review on. So, I mean, you know his story. George, you want to do a little quick summary about the condition for David?
Sure. Yeah, David has just a number of different disabilities and challenges. When he was in the womb, the middle of his face didn't form properly, so you've got a cleft lip, cleft palate, some brain abnormalities, a lot of things to mention to where, as part of the story, you'd think he'd be having intractable seizures all the time, or that he would have died coming out of the womb, but he is blessedly here with us. So
yeah, really. So what you have is the vulnerability, the hard candy of David's arrival, and meet George, who is an exceptionally talented, professional, competent, and unable in and of himself to treat this child that he loves, right? So could you tell me a little bit about your first reaction when you heard, I think he was 7 months in utero, right?
I think it was like 20 weeks. I don't think it was quite that far along, but yeah, it was funny. I was thinking about this. I'm an accountant, and so funny enough, I was talking about the billing for the pregnancy with this like billing lady in another room while Rachel was doing the ultrasound, and so it was this great reversal about talking about very minor things in the grand scheme of things, of dollars and cents. Someone coming in and saying, "Hey, look, you got to come into this other room, you got to see this, what's going on," and then being basically transformed into a different world in the ultrasound room. Seeing, I think at that point we just knew David had a cleft lip, and so there's a ton of potentialities from that. So we were obviously very scared, and yeah, I mean, in that room, for me, I did just kind of feel like a clarity of mission. I felt...
Wait a minute, in the room where they're giving you the diagnosis that early?
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it was like, okay, all right, God, you've given me this child. I have no idea what to expect, what he'll live, what the pregnancy will look like, but I know... I'm called to support my wife and to love this kid as long as he's with us. I think I've been very well catechized by my parents and by my church that every every life has value. It's not up to us to choose when our children die or live. So abortion was very much off the table, and I feel like that was, for me, just a huge sense of relief, because there was no moral ambiguity about it. There was no well, should we abort this child? Should we not? I knew that was an option, and I knew that, had we signaled to the medical establishment that's where we were leaning, that they would have set us up with resources and done all that. But thankfully, no one pushed us in that way. Everyone was very supportive from there on out. But yeah, clarity of mission of okay, we're going to take this child to term and see what happens.
Wow. So there was no decision that you were going to make at that point, because the decision of his arrival was beyond your control, and you were just going to deal with it when he did arrive. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. Yep.
So when he did arrive, how did that hit you?
Yeah, I mean, when he arrived, I mean, the pregnancy, in some ways, the pregnancy and the birth were just like every other. I mean, this is totally, in some ways, in the sense that there wasn't, I mean, you go to the hospital. He was just about full term. Rachel was induced, but as soon as David came out, or as soon as it was just about time for him to come out, like maybe 20 nurses came into the room. It was just this like flood of like all hands on deck. What's going to happen? And we were thinking he was going to die. We were, people had told us, look, he's going to have seizures, or he's not going to be able to breathe, or, what have you. That's, just be prepared for that. And so we were, but there were signs. Okay, he's still with us. They swooped him to another room. Rachel was left alone. I was with David. It was very, very scary for her in particular. But as the days went on, obviously, he looked super weird. It didn't look normal.
Yeah.
He had a cleft palate. We learned that his eyes were affected by all this. He was blind. We started to learn some new stuff about him, but he was still with us.
Yeah.
And as we went, we were like, okay, wow, he can suck from a bottle. He can, he's he looks healthy enough to take home. And
yeah.
So we were certainly very, very scared, but God kept giving us signs that looked like he's going to be with us as we went.
Wow.
So
you are because of your competence, you're also built like very self-contained, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that served you well at that time to a point, right?
Yes, certainly to a point. I think, like during the pregnancy and afterwards, Rachel's researching, and she can know everything. She knows everything about his condition.
Yeah.
She knows more than doctors do, all the rest.
Yeah.
I took a different tact of like, okay, like I don't know what the hypotheticals are. I don't know what he's going to turn out, but I know that once he's here with us, I'm going to take care of him as best I can. So in some ways that was my like personality, dealing with it, I suppose.
Yeah. So you weren't fighting against it. It was serving you.
I think that clarity of mission was just like, was there. And so, once he was here, I was like, okay, what do I need to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And did you feel like you could reach out and ask for help from family and friends, and were they responsive? Because you already had 2 kids.
Yep, we did. I feel super, super supported by our community in many ways. I think David before he has a G tube now at age 2, but for the first 2 years he was bottle fed, and Rachel and I kind of knew the intricacies of his cleft palate and how to feed him and how to set him up. So really, only Rachel and I were really like kind of competent to really kind of take care of him.
Yeah.
But beyond the pure like physical needs of David, like we just felt super supported. I think particularly by our church community. David's godfather, who has since now passed, his name was David George, Father David George, a priest in our church, was just, I felt like, the language in 1 Corinthians about the weakest being the most honorable in the church, really feeling like that was true for David, that like something about like the eyes of the church were set on him, or the eyes of Father David were like, he was he was like the most special among us, and should be treated as the most honorable, even as he has nothing to offer in the world's eyes in many ways.
Yeah. I remember his baptism, where he's in that, there's the font, and then there's this naked, beautiful baby boy, and it was so moving. It was so moving. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just the picture of the gospel that David, I think, has made more and more clear. Just if God accepts a child like him, who has nothing, like I said, nothing to offer in the world's eyes, is like utterly dependent, can't speak, can't walk, can't, will never have an independent existence, just that sheer grace of this is how God accepts David. And then I think the big part of our story is being like, okay, if God accepts David like this, what does that also say about us, and how God, loves us out of sheer grace, with nothing to offer ourselves?
Yeah. Okay, this is a little bit of a movement, a curve of, all right, Rachel is obviously a financial contributor, right, to the household, as well as being, front line with David, and the ultimate researcher. That woman does know how to go after it.
Oh, for sure,
yeah.
for sure.
But you had the lion's share of responsibility for keeping that whole family afloat, right? So how were you able to concentrate on that? You're very accomplished. You had, big jobs, and now your big job is here, right?
Right.
With the family, and yet you have to keep going. So how did you handle that?
I'm sure there's some compartmentalization of okay, there's this world,
right,
and then there's that world.
Flip that switch. Yeah.
I think I've gotten a lot of wisdom from my father-in-law over the years, and one of the things that he's always impressed on me is do what's best for your family. And for some reason that line just really sticks with me, and really helps frame I don't know, some of the career and family stuff where it's okay, figure out a way to make it work to serve your family. So, it was, trying to work remotely more, trying to tell my boss, look, here's the situation.
Yeah.
And trying to kind of, work as flexibly as I could.
And were your bosses or your boss, did they understand that, and were they open to that? Because I'm sure your competence also allowed you a certain leeway.
That was helpful, having been there for a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of a little bit of a fight to try and get some of that. So it was, I think, switching jobs at that point, taking a remote role that I could, be able to kind of live in both worlds, because David's care was so intense at the time. So that I did end up switching jobs, which was, a blessing at the time. So, trying to do what's best for my family in that regard. Yeah.
Well, you clearly have. So then, is it? I don't even know if this is the right word. It's the only thing I know how to ask. Is life easier with David now, even though his condition is still the same? I mean.
Yeah. I think, part of it is just the distress of a child coming to the world and you have no idea how to take care of him. You don't know if he's going to live or die. I think we just have a lot of clarity right now, or at least a lot of just gratitude in his continued existence with us, where there's no I don't think on a daily basis so much where is he going to die tonight, or is he can we do this, or some of those things. And so we're just super grateful that he's here and healthy and growing, and we're just along for his ride as long as he's with us. So there's that kind of psychological, I think, clarity, which has been really good. He now has a G-tube, like I said,
and that helped because then he could gain weight.
It's amazing. In some ways, his continued existence is dependent on modern technology that we're so grateful for. That we can take him anywhere, and he can have dinner in a stroller, and just we can just do that. So I don't know. We're super grateful that we're able to be with him as long as he's with us.
Yep. Okay, so what were the biggest hurdles you had to face to take care of yourself? We've talked a lot about you taking care of your family, which is honorable and right and good and all those wonderful things. But there comes a point where, I would think there would be some, kind of breaking points at some point, because you're only human.
Sure.
Or are you just way more mature and godly than I am or will be?
No. I probably just am not so good at knowing what I need, perhaps, and I don't know. It was just a time, I think, of that first year or two being like, okay, my head's down, like doing whatever I can to take care of David and what he needs and serving Rachel and the other kids and whatnot. I think started exercising more, I think praying the daily office and the Book of Common Prayer, so morning and evening prayer has been super helpful as kind of like a way of living into the rhythms of of the church and reading the scriptures year by year. So that's been helpful for me as a devotional practice. But
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. Okay, and so I know you and Rachel were already parents. You had 2 kids before you had David. Now you have 5. And so when David came, though, certainly that was a twist on your relationship with Rachel. And what shifted? Or just it didn't shift, it just intensified? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of put our marriage, I don't know, maybe I just keep going back to this word, but just like kind of on mission where, I don't know, like, okay, God, you're giving us this like amazing gift, but also responsibility. And, I think it required a lot of fortitude in our marriage in kind of serving him. And then, Rachel's, has basically kind of her writing career has been just predicated on David and telling his story. And, David can't speak, but his, voice, truly, I think, resounds through Rachel's work. So, I don't know. I feel like David's coming has kind of reframed, our marriage and what we're called to do in many ways.
Focus, yeah. That's very interesting. And as a witness, beautiful to see, Okay, so what have been the biggest surprises you had with David for these almost 5 years in July? It's almost 5 years.
I think Rachel does like a wonderful job of reflecting on suffering and David's role in reframing our view of suffering. For me, I don't know. I just really love David. Like, I think he's super fun. I think that like, at least for boys, like fart noises are like innately funny. Now knowing David, who has I don't know, in many ways just as intellectually just very disabled, but like that is still funny to him. Like that, like, every single time. I think there's stuff like that. I think like David's just super mischievous. If you're wearing glasses, he'll try and throw them down. So there's been numerous times like going up to take communion at church, he's grabbing my glasses and throwing them down, and I'm having to, shamefully pick them up in the middle of church or whatnot. He's loves to like grab stuff and throw it behind him, and I don't know, he's just really silly.
Yeah.
And so he's not capable of much, but every little thing that he does is just like a total joy to see what he's able to do. And truly just like being in his presence.
Yeah.
So there's something about being with someone who's disabled or a child that's disabled, or even a child in general or a baby, like someone who you just behold their presence. And so it's kind of like David is this perpetual child that we get to just be with all the time. And the joy in who he is what he has to offer, and not necessarily hopes for what he will do in the future in some like grand independent or impact on the world with his work or intellect or whatever that we so
that's pretty deep right there. I mean, and a lesson for me and you. Wow.
I think the biggest thing for David has been like viewing David not as like the exception to the rule. So like the rule being we are all like independent. We are all, defined by our work and intellect or whatever we can stamp, we can mark on the world in that way. But that David's kind of the proof that a different rule exists, that we actually are all dependent on each other. We didn't create ourselves. We are created by God in His image, and that we actually our worth and is not defined by what we can do out in the world, or what we can prove to others or ourselves, or what we can self-identify as even, but it's just our, being made in God's image. It's just our presence. It's just, the fact that Jesus came to be present with us. And I don't know, it's really just kind of reframed how we think of ourselves, but also how we now know God views us.
Has that helped you looking at yourself then, and what you want for yourself or to achieve or something like that?
Yeah, I think, I need the gospel daily.
Yeah.
And I know that I probably need to remind myself of that on a daily basis.
Sure, of course we all do.
And so, yeah.
So, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, the podcast is called Hard Candy because we want to be able to taste the sweetness in the difficult times. So would that be the sweetness that you're experiencing? Nothing less than a whole new worldview that then impacts how you walk through life? Or is there something else?
Yeah, absolutely. Missing? Yeah, it's the whole worldview of God's presence with us in the midst of suffering. These big thoughts around what suffering means in the life of the believer. But then also just the candy of just being with a disabled child and getting that joy in his presence on a daily basis.
The fact that he enjoys the sound of a fart, it's just something so sweet about it.
Oh, yeah. He finds joy in just the smallest things.
Aww.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that I haven't asked that you'd like to say to everybody or me?
No, I think this has been really great. I really appreciate it.
Well, I have a deep love and respect for you, George. You have no idea. And you're giving and you're, Rachel's told me when she first met you in college, she said, that's the man I want. And when I met you, I'm like, oh, I get it, right? And that was before anything, and just now seeing the refinement of big God principles in your daily life.
That's right.
It's just so encouraging. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay.